Parenting for Faith is an organisation that exists as a resource to both churches and also to families and people who are influential in the lives of children. I'm sorry to say that Parenting for Faith isn't a 3-step solution for how to help children become Christians and stay in the church forever. That would be much easier if I gave you an A, B, and a C, and you think if you do these things, then everyone will know Jesus and love him forever. It's not that. But what Parenting for Faith is a set of tools that are designed to give confidence to those influential people in a child's life so that they can navigate what it means to spiritually raise the children. And I say important people because although it is called Parenting for Faith, it's kind of a little bit misleading because these are tools that can be used by anyone who is influential in a child's life, whether it's grandparents, godparents, aunts, uncles, friends at church, parents, friends, that's anyone.
Kids, from the moment they're born, we are filled with hopes and dreams for them, for their todays, for their tomorrows, for their future, for their spiritual lives. And then, like, reality hits, and we're just desperate to survive the day. Can we get them clean and their bodies in vaguely the right place at the right time? It's just a process of getting through the day. And yet we know there's more for our children. Yes, we want to produce productive, independent members of society, but we also want to give them a firm foundation that will last a lifetime.
In this world of mess and pain, our kids need to experience in every part of their being that they are deeply loved by God and love Him in return. So how do we give that to our kids?
We've all been on different journeys that have led us to this course. Some of us are really new to faith and we're still figuring out how we feel about it. Some of us have been Christians for 30 years. Some of us came from homes that were wonderful in terms of parenting for faith. Some of us had faith backgrounds with our parents that weren't so great. Some of us have no idea what it would have been like to be a child in a home like that. But no matter what your journey, you are called to be so significant in the life of your child.
One of the biggest things you may notice when looking at children is that there is a big difference between a God-smart kid and a God-connected kid. A God-smart kid knows the right Christian answers. They know the life they should be living. They're comfortable with how to do Christianity. But it all seems to stop at their head. But a God-connected kid is an entirely different matter. A God-connected kid lives in a vibrant, two-way relationship with God, sharing life with Him, knowing they are loved, handling the world with confidence that comes from having the love, peace, and healing of the living God in their daily reality. Our hearts long to create God-connected kids, but so often we feel trapped into only growing God's smart ones.
We try and we desperately try to grow God's smart children. We buy the Bibles, we take them on trips, we do devotionals at home, we do memory verses, we do plaques on the walls. We try to grow God's smart kids and hope that one day they will magically leap into being God connected. Hurrah! But it's so exhausting to be trapped into just growing God's smart kids because there's so much more for our kids. God has designed them to be God connected, and we're called to grow them to be that. Yes, a lot of us say, yes, that's why we take them to church. We want them to go to a church that has a good Sunday morning program or who tells Bible stories in an engaging way. We want church to be that place of discipleship for them. And it's really good for children to be engaged in a community of church. It's wonderful. Being in a church community is a vital part of their discipleship, but it isn't the center of their discipleship.
God has a plan for discipling children, and actually we find it in the book of Deuteronomy in chapter 6, and I'm just going to read to you a few verses, starting at verse 5. It says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give to you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up." God designed it for discipleship amongst families to take part in the everyday normal parts of life, in the walking along the road on the way to school, in the time preparing a meal, snuggle time on the sofa. God didn't design it so that the primary method of discipleship of children was corporate. He designed it for families to be doing that in their everyday. And the joy that comes from being the church is that we get the incredible privilege of cheering parents on. The Parenting for Faith approach is all about equipping families and helping them to catch a vision for what might be possible. Because parents in our churches come from all sorts of backgrounds. They might come from different experiences of church or faith or non-faith. And so we get to help them see what is possible in their family. And just to give a little bit of an example of how that might be an important thing, hands up if you enjoy going to the dentist. Anyone? A lot of shaking of heads. No, I hate the dentist. Fun fact about me, had 16 teeth removed in my lifetime. It's quite traumatic. I don't want to talk about it. But the reason that we hate the dentist, a lot of us, it's the judgment, right? Because if we're completely honest, we probably don't floss twice a day and brush after every meal, even though that's what the dentists tell us that we should do. So we put off going because we feel like we're going to get in trouble. We're not going to live up to the expectations that the dentists have for us. Even though dentists are there to keep us healthy and they are helpful and they want us to be in a good place, we still feel bad about going there. And sometimes parents can feel a little bit like that when it comes to discipling their children. They know all the things they're supposed to be doing, or there are expectations that they feel like are on them, and they don't want to be seen to be not living up to them. They want their church leaders, their kids' church leaders, to be seeing them raising these incredibly godly children and completing A, B, C, and D. But actually, they're always slightly worried they're going to get found out because they maybe aren't doing those things in the way that they think that there are these expectations. And that can lead to them feeling guilty. But as an alternative, hands up if you enjoy a trip to IKEA. Anyone? Yes, a lot more hands on that. Now, I don't know about you, IKEA, people plan trips to IKEA like it's a day out. Like, you know, it's like, who am I going to go with as friends? Let's make sure we stay for lunch, get the meatballs, all of that. And the reason people love going to IKEA, I think, is because IKEA does an incredible job of laying out all these options for you and your home. They walk in and it's, here, let us show you what your house could look like. Here, come and experience this way of doing things. Here's an item that might look excellent here, but if you don't like it here, you can try it here with this item and you can put these together or these together. And as you walk around, you start to get a vision for all the different things that might be possible and work out what of those things might fit in your own home. And that's what setting a vision for parents is all about. It's about helping them see what might be possible in their own family, not telling them this is what you have to do and helping them to feel, making them feel guilty about that. But actually, it's about giving them a vision to say, hey, here's lots of things you could try. You can now decide what fits best in your family. Because parents have enough on their plate. But instead of giving them things to do, we give them things that equip them, that work in their family, and giving them tools and ideas to find their way for how they best connect with God in their family, the way that fits for them. And so as part of the course, it goes through 5 key tools that can equip parents and influential people as they disciple their children. And so I'm just going to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour through those 5 tools. 5 key tools that Parenting for Faith talks about are creating windows, framing, unwinding wrong views of God, chat and catch, and surfing. And so let me start with creating windows. Now, creating windows is all about giving children a little glimpse into your faith or into the faith of their adult in their life. Because parents do that naturally with other things. They model skills and values and behaviors that they find important. And as kids see those things lived out in their parents or their carers, they learn them for themselves easily and naturally. And creating windows is all about doing the same thing, but for skills and behaviors and values that the adults in their life hold in terms of their spiritual life. And so I'm just going to share a little story with you here from a lady called Janice, who's a mum who's done the course. And she articulates really well what it means to create a window into her faith for her children.
I think that we are the best script for our children. And I'm learning that it's not so much what I say to our son, but how much he sees me in my walk with God. It's not about me talking about God and then living directly opposite to that. It's not, there is no point in talking about having faith in God, and yet in my conversations and day-to-day walk with God, I'm not living it out and what that means, you know. And so I feel that we are the best as parents. We are the best examples that our children can look at and see. It's almost like a window to who God is, because then God doesn't become a concept. He's not something we just talk about, because they see us live it out in our daily lives, what it means to have a relationship with our Heavenly Father. And I think that's the best gift that we can give to our children. Because it's not, if we make it about theology and getting everything right and perfect, and how do we pray, and how do we behave in church, and how do we do this and that, I don't think that is really going to transfer who the Father is and His love for us to them, so much as when they see us walk out what we say that we believe in. And I think that's what they're actually going to emulate and walk in. So I think that is what I think I was getting from Rachel from the Parenting for Faith course, that, practice what we say we believe in. And our children, as we talk them through why we do what we do, based on our beliefs and our faith, be able to also walk in that and not be told one thing and not see us practice it or live it out. Yeah.
So creating windows is basically all about showing children what it looks like to have a two-way relationship with God, rather than just telling them, it's showing them. And so just to give a couple of examples of what that might look like. For parents who manage to carve out a little bit of time for a quiet time with God, often that can look like something that is happening away from where their children are. It's either before they get up in the morning, or in the car while they're waiting to pick up their kids from school, or it might be, they do it while their kids are in the house, but they say, don't disturb me, I'm going to have some time with God, and shut the door. But for kids, that means they don't get to see what a quiet time looks like. For them, there could be anything going on behind that closed door. Their mum could be cartwheeling with God and singing or sleeping or whatever. They have no idea what it means when their parent says, I'm going to go and spend some time with God. And so a simple way of giving kids a glimpse into what that looks like, practically just leaving the door open. It's not about inviting kids into the quiet time that you're having with God. That is between a parent and God. But by leaving the door open, kids are nosy and they're going to peek in and they get to see actually what it looks like when their parent spends time with God. Another example might be about the way that we communicate with God. So lots of us, I'm sure, will be praying and chatting to God throughout the day in their head. But if you are a parent, you have children around you, they will have no idea that that's happening. They have no idea that their parent is talking to God throughout the day. That is an incredibly valuable thing for them to see. And so by encouraging parents to verbalize the way they talk to God, it helps give kids a window into what it looks like to be in relationship with God every day. And whether that's while your parents are making a meal and they're chatting to God, rather than doing it in their head, doing it out loud, or in the car when an ambulance goes past, often we'll say, God be with that person in there. But by doing it out loud, kids just start to pick up, actually, my parent chats to God all day. And they get to learn and then start to realize that they can do that for themselves. So that's creating windows, giving kids a glimpse of what their parents or their carers or the adults in their lives' faith looks like in their everyday. The second key tool is called framing. And essentially, this is all about helping kids see what's going on and what God is doing. Now, when you walk into an art gallery, often you will see pieces of art with a frame around them, Or if it's a particularly modern installation, it'll have a little explanation card next to it. And that frame or that explanation card tells people as they walk in what they're looking at. And so in the same way, we can do that for children. We can put a frame around something. We can draw attention to something and help children understand what it is that they are seeing. And we can do this by explaining the things that we sometimes take for granted that people or children assumed knowledge. We can tell them stories. We can help them when they ask questions, because, you know, parents do this all the time in kind of the non-spiritual world. Kids are always asking, why is that happening? Why is the tree leaves brown? Why are they on the floor? Why is that bird doing that? You know, parents are always explaining to a kid to help them understand what's going on around them. And we can do that when it comes to kind of our spiritual lives. We can explain things and frame them for kids so that they understand what's going on. Now, personally, I tend to use this tool a lot when I'm leading a service with children present. So rather than kind of using just the assumed language where everyone knows what it means, I might say, instead of, okay, now we're going to worship, let's sing together or hum together or read the words together in current times. I might say, okay, now we're going to worship because God is a good God and he loves it when we tell him how we feel about him, when we connect with him as we sing and we connect our hearts to him. So let's do that now together. By giving kids just a little explanation of what is happening, it helps them start to learn what it looks like to be living a life of faith. They get to see what's going on around them. We sometimes encourage parents to do this in a church context with their own children, you know, pointing out, oh, you see that person over there in worship, they've got their hands in the air. That means that they're worshiping God and telling him that they want to be close to him. They're reaching out to him. By helping parents understand the power of pointing out things and explaining things, it helps kids get around a more solid picture of what it means to know God. Okay, the third key tool is called Unwinding. And this is all about helping kids understand truly who God is and maybe identifying any of those kind of false truths that they've picked up that have shaped their view of God and kind of bringing them back to what is true. Because it could be because of something that they've seen or something someone else has said to them. They've picked up bits and pieces from different places, or they've seen something going on in the world that has shaped their view of God. But we want them to know who God really is according to the Bible, not according to the bits and pieces they pick up. Because let's be honest, we all get things mixed up sometimes, particularly when it comes to theology. And to understand our huge God and who he is in relation to what they're seeing in the world can be a difficult thing. And sometimes we find it hard, and kids definitely do, to work out just how to reconcile those two things together. And so part of a parent's role is to help kids see who God really is and build a healthy view of him. I think particularly now in this kind of past season that we're coming out of, kids have been told that God is good and that God heals and God loves us, but they've seen a world that has been messed up by a pandemic. They've maybe lost grandparents, or they've been isolated from friends and family for a long time. And helping them connect that truth that they've seen in the world to the God who is good is something that is incredibly important, and helping them just coach them through what that means. As an example, you might have a child who started to see that God as a distant God, one who is far away. And so for a parent to be able to identify that and start unwinding it, it might be all about reminding them how close God is and how he's always with us. It could be by slowing down their speech when they pray together, because God has all the time in the world for them and he is right there with them. It could be about encouraging kids to chat to God about small, insignificant things, like what they had for breakfast or where they'd like to go at the weekend, as well as the big stuff like sick relatives or struggles at school. By kind of giving that balance and bringing the small things into their relationship with God, it helps them see that God is right there close and with them. And it's an intimate relationship, not one that is far away. The next key tool is chatting and catching, which is all about helping kids communicate with God in that two-way relationship that so many of us know. Because I wonder if you've ever asked a kid how to pray, and guaranteed they will all say it's about putting your hands together, closing your eyes, not making any noise, saying dear God, saying amen at the end. They've got this formula for what it means to pray, but actually those aren't the requirements for a relationship with God and communicating with God. God can communicate with them in all sorts of ways, and we use the word chatting because it helps kids understand that it's like talking to a friend, like their friends at school, they chat to them, and in the same way they can have that informal conversation with God. Because they have that direct line to God. Sometimes as adults, we tend to put ourselves into that high priest role. And you'll remember from the Old Testament, God's people would come to the temple with their offerings to God, and it would be the high priest that took them on their behalf to God. But we know that because of Jesus, we don't have to do that anymore. We have direct access to the Father, and so do children. But sometimes as adults, we can by nature just insert ourselves into that relationship by praying for them, or I'll pray and you say amen at the end. But actually giving kids this tool of chatting helps them to know that they can go directly. And it's just all about using informal language and showing them the kind of things that they can chat to God about. And as I'm starting to help kids understand what it means to chat to God, I'll use some prompts to help them do that. And then they will be able to, once they start to get used to it, be able to just go off on their own and chat to God for however long they want. And so I wondered, just now while we're together, I might give you a little example of that. And I might just coach you guys through having a moment to chat to God if you're up for it. So you might just you can close your eyes if you like, if that's comfortable for you, so you're not distracted. You can lean back in your chair however you want. There's no requirement, but however you want to get your body into a position to spend a moment with God. And why don't you do that now? And I'm just going to give you a few prompts of things you might like to chat to God about. And I'm going to leave a little moment of quiet after each one, which is just time for you to tell God how you're feeling about that, or the answer to that question. So why didn't you tell God something that makes you feel happy? Tell God about your favorite TV show. Tell God how you're feeling about your church right now. Tell God who your best friend is and what you love about them. Tell God what you'd like to have for dinner this evening. And that's it. I wonder how you found that. It's a really simple model of just giving kids different things that they can talk to God about that they might not expect, and helping them understand that these conversations can happen at any time. There isn't a formal time to chat to God, but it can be part of their everyday, and it can be about the things in their everyday. But we all know that conversation isn't just one way, it's two-way. And as adults, we often use language like hearing from God, hearing God's voice, getting a word or a picture. But that can actually be quite a confusing language for children to understand, because kids are quite literal. And so if you say, let's hear God's voice, often they might expect to actually hear an audible God's voice. And then they will forget to pay attention to all the other ways that God might be communicating with them. Now, some of them might actually hear God's voice. That is an unknown that happened in the Bible. But there are lots of other ways that we can catch what God is communicating to us. And so when we talk about catching, it's all about training children and helping them to understand all the different ways that they might catch God's voice. And so here's just a few examples of how we might catch God's voice. We might hear or see things. Lots of us will hear from God by him giving us words and pictures, but we say to kids that he might drop a picture or a video into that place that you imagine things. We know that we can catch from God with our emotions. We might be feeling anxious and ask God to give us peace. We might be filled with joy in a way that we weren't before we went into that moment of encounter with God. We might feel God's presence on our skin. I'm very careful to not use specifics there to say some of you, for example, you might say some of you might feel warm hands if you're encountering the Holy Spirit. But we don't want to limit what God might be doing physically with children. So we just tell them that to pay attention to what's going on their skin. They might know things in their heart they didn't know before. They might dream dreams that are from God. There are so many different ways that we can catch from God. And it's just about helping kids understand and start to learn what those things might be. And so again, if you're up for it, I'm just going to give you a chance to catch from God right now. And to do that really simply, I'm going to give you a question to ask God, and then we're just going to be quiet for a few moments and just pay attention to some of the ways that God might be communicating with you, maybe some of the things on the slide in front of you, and see if you catch an answer to the question. So again, get into whatever position that you might like to, just to spend this moment with God. And I'm going to ask you to ask God, if there was a game that we could play together right now, what game would you choose? And then if you feel like you caught an answer to that question, you might want to follow up with a why that game, God? I wonder if any of you feel like you caught an answer, and we don't have to share it, but maybe just give us a wave if you think you did. Great, amazing. Yeah, it's all about helping, just making it totally part of a normal everyday relationship with God, to be catching from him and for him to be communicating with them, because we know he is. You know, the Bible says, God says, call to me and I will tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know. He doesn't say I might tell you great and unsearchable things. He says I will. And so we want kids to be learning and be equipped to be part of that relationship, and encourage them that if it's something that they can practice, if they feel like they're not catching God's voice now, God is speaking and they can practice and learn how to communicate with him. And just as an aside, I often use this in a corporate setting if I'm in a kids ministry or in a service, and you might think there is no way I'm going to get kids to sit still enough to do this. But my experience is, whether I've got 2 children in front of me or 200 in a big tent at a festival, no matter how hyped the room is and how excited they are, when you invite the presence of God and you give them a moment to communicate and to connect with the one who made them, they always engage. It's actually a beautiful thing. So I would encourage you, it really does work. And then the final key tool is called Surfing the Waves. And this is all about helping, looking and keeping an eye out for what kids are interested in, what they're curious about in terms of an aspect of a life with God, and journeying with them for as long as that interest lasts. They might show their interest in something through curiosity or anger, or by asking questions or wanting to hear stories about a specific thing. And the role of parents is often to recognize that wave of interest and think, okay, let's journey alongside this kid in that pace, at whatever pace fits them, and sort of help them see and what God is doing and what that looks like and how to make the most of it. Kids might be engaged, suddenly be really interested in a particular worship song and they want to listen to it over and over. And so a parent can kind of be connecting with their kid over that song. You know, what is it about this song that you find so interesting, or what do you like about it? Maybe talking about some of the words. And it might be that kid wants to listen to that song over and over and over and over for a day, and then the next day they have absolutely no interest in it. That is such a thing that happens with kids. They're really excited and then they don't care anymore. But Surfing the Waves in a spiritual context is about just spotting those things that a kid might be interested in, helping them learn about a relationship with God through that until the interest comes to an end. So those are the key tools that we talk about at Parenting for Faith. They form the content of the course along with some other topics.
Before we interview Mim about her experience of running Parenting for Faith, we're just going to show you a short video hearing from some of the parents and grandparents and people involved who went to Mim's Parenting for Faith course.
to get ideas for our toddler group, but also in the expectation that I'll probably become a grandparent in the not too distant future.
I help out with the 8 to 11-year-olds at our church, and also we have 2 grown-up boys of our own.
I joined the course with my husband. We've got 2 children. Well, I was pregnant at the time. We've got 2 children, a 2-year-old and a 5-week-old.
I did the course as a grandparent.
I guess I was in the capacity of a parent slash foster carer, although really the same thing. But yeah, that was me, to 4 kids.
Probably how to enable children to develop their own relationship with God rather than it being second-hand from church or from parents.
Bringing up our children, we didn't really have a proactive plan on how to develop a relationship with Christ. It was all a bit hit and miss, really.
I'm quite an overthinker, so I would think a lot about, how can we make sure that our children grow up to love Jesus, or can we do our best to facilitate that? But it never sort of went from vague thoughts to practical actions.
It felt a little bit like you sort of talking to them or imposing something on them. So I kind of felt a little bit of like that.
One of the hardest things about parenting for faith, I think, is answering questions where there's no real answer, and also being sensitive to the questions that aren't always asked.
There were loads of really practical, down-to-earth ideas of how to show that God is in everyday life.
We enjoy doing the group discussions because we're in with another group of parents from our church who also had grown-up children.
I loved the practical ideas that were given on the course, and especially the opportunity to talk with other parents who have kids of a similar age, and to be able to chat with my husband as well.
I really enjoyed the headspace to just think about this.
I found that I could recall incidents in my own life where framing and modelling had been used and how that had influenced me. So that's quite an encouragement to go forward and for us to frame and model for our own children.
When reading a Bible story, rather than just reading it, how about stopping from time to time and asking, what might God be thinking or feeling or doing at this point in the story? And that really helps to open up what the story really means and to highlight a relationship with God.
Parenting faith has opened my eyes as to how important it is for parents to guide their children from a very young age into a one-to-one relationship with Jesus.
Having done the course now, I found it such a good reminder of what an impact our day-to-day faith will have on our kids' lives.
The kind of importance of creating windows for your children to see into your relationship with God.
I found the last session, helping children connect with church, very useful. I think it could almost be used as a standalone to encourage us all in the church family to connect and to witness together.
So, Mim, would you like to just introduce yourself briefly, and then maybe say a bit about what your experience was of running the course, and also why it was good, what you liked about it?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Mim. I'm the growing faith pastor at St Mary Bredin Church in Canterbury. So we ran the Parenting for Faith course for the first time in January. And obviously at that point, the only option was Zoom. But until the pandemic, it had only ever been run in person, I think. I don't think there had been an online version arranged, but we did it on Zoom, and we did it alternate weeks for 7 sessions. So we actually missed out one of the sessions just because of the timings of the term and how it worked for us. but it's 8 sessions overall. Lauren's explained the 5 key tools. So it covers each of those tools as for 5 weeks, and it splits chat and catch into 2 weeks. So 2 sessions there. So that's 6 sessions. And then there's one on prayer ministry for children and one on connecting children to church. So they're the 8 sessions. And we did it on Zoom from 7:45 till 9 o'clock, so an hour and a quarter. I think if you did it in person, it's often a little bit longer. There's more time for people to chat at the start and get to know each other and build relationships. So I guess the thing with Zoom is that you do lose that a little bit. It's quite hard to connect the whole group together. But we did try and allow as much time as possible for the group discussion. So we used breakout groups and put people into groups that way. And that on the feedback, people found really valuable, having that time to discuss with other parents or other grandparents. They found the most helpful. And in that, we split them into their discussion groups based on the age of their eldest child that they worked with. So that really helped people sort of connect with people in a similar stage to them. So if people had 3 children and the eldest was 9, we'd put them with other parents with 9 or 10-year-olds at a similar stage to them. Similarly, we grouped the grandparents together, we grouped godparents together, and we also had people from our children and youth teams. So if they came in that capacity, we put them in groups together as well, just so they could discuss it all on a similar stage. And they found that really helpful, being with people in similar groups to them. In terms of what worked well, people just found it really helpful and really encouraging that they weren't on their own, that there were other people dealing with the same sort of questions that they had about parenting and how to answer things with their children, that kind of thing. And as Lauren said earlier, it's not an answer, it's not a 3-step answer to solving every problem, but it is about equipping and encouraging parents. And I think that's what they found really helpful. That is about tools to equip you in various situations. And so, yeah, we've started using chat and catch in our groups now on a Sunday. So every week, all the children do chat and catch. And we have that as a set point in our sessions, just to really encourage that. And now all the parents know what we're doing as well. They know what we are talking about when we say we're doing chat and catch as well. So having that link across between church and home really helps.
That's great. Just thinking from a practical point of view, I know a lot of people here are already really busy with various responsibilities that they have within their local church. So how difficult is it as a facilitator to run this course?
It's probably one of the easiest courses I've run. So as a facilitator, Parenting for Faith sends you everything, and I mean everything. It's all downloadable PDFs and downloadable videos. The course is video based. So as a facilitator or host, you welcome everyone. You might do an icebreaker or a little activity if you're in person. We did a poll similar to how Ben did one earlier. We would do polls at the start of our Zoom sessions. And then it's literally put on the video. It's all video content. It tells you in the video when to pause it. It puts the questions up on the screen in the video for the discussion questions. There's participant handbooks, so everyone can have a copy of the handbook to follow along with and make notes if they want to. And then you just put them into discussion groups and give them time to chat, and then maybe feedback something at the end. So in the chat bar on Zoom, we just asked everyone to put one thing that they'd found really helpful from that session. And that was it in terms of what I needed to do. So I just made sure I'd watched the video beforehand and read through the notes, but I'd never done the course myself before I ran it. And so it was super easy to run. So yeah, don't be scared if you haven't heard of any of it before or done it before. It's really easy to run.
And it sounds like it might be something that if you feel like you are kind of maxed out, it's something that's quite easy to delegate or
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
someone that you've been maybe wanting to get involved volunteering for a while, it might be an easy way for them to come along and get involved. And so two questions. One, how many participants would you kind of need to make it work? And also, is it something that you could envisage multiple churches running in collaboration together?
Yeah, absolutely. I know Lauren's run courses with other churches as well. It's really easy to do with other groups and other churches. There's no sort of problem with that at all. And again, if it means that you've got people of a similar stage with their children, being able to connect and share experiences, that's really helpful. It's really beneficial. In terms of like sort of minimum number of people, we had discussion groups anywhere between 3 and 8 people. Particularly because we were on Zoom, we only really wanted a maximum of 4 screens in the discussion rooms. So that was up to 8 people if it was couples in them. But yeah, anything from 3 to 8 is probably a good group. And yeah, just have as many groups as you need to, depending on how many people you've got signed up. But yeah, it's definitely doable with very few people or a lot of people.
Last question maybe is just top tips for running a course. What were the things that the knowledge that you learned running it that you'll take into the next course that you run?
Sure. As I say, Parenting for Faith provide everything, and it's really clear, loads of detail, really useful stuff. So I won't sort of go through what they give you already, but a couple of things that we found really helpful or just worked quite well. Firstly, having someone to host with you, so maybe doing it in a pair can be helpful. If you're on Zoom, then having someone to do the tech side of it or let people in, or that kind of thing is useful. If you're in person, it's just great to have an extra person if you're facilitating discussions. So just bear that in mind. You might want someone to run it with you. Do contact Parenting for Faith if you have questions. They're really good at getting back to you quickly. They put me in touch with Lauren when I had a question. So yeah, do get in contact with them if you have questions for it. I would say, firstly, when you decide on your timings for it, stick to the timings and honour those who have committed to it. I know we'd say that generally for courses, but particularly with parents when they're time pressured, honouring their time commitment is really important. So on our final session, there had been requests for longer discussion groups. So I said the week before, we're going to have an extra 15 minutes next week. If you don't want to stay an extra 15 minutes or need to leave earlier, then that's absolutely fine. But there will be an extra 15 minutes if you want to, just so people knew. But try and stick to timings. Because we were on Zoom, we decided that we wouldn't be able to provide refreshments and cakes as we would usually. So I sent each household a little pack. So we'd printed off the participant handbook for them, so had that and a pen. We gave them a packet of Haribo sweets for each week of the course, so that everyone had sweets or something to eat. And we gave them a copy of a book, which we were using as a church. So it was like a family devotionals book. So they had something. So it was just a really nice little pack for them to have and sort of know that everyone was doing the same thing together. So that was quite nice. And then because we were doing alternate weeks, I sent a sort of summary email on the other alternate weeks, just summarising what the previous session had been about, and sent a link to the video if they'd missed the session or wanted to rewatch it. I sent them the link to that. And Parenting for Faith provide loads of additional material for each session as well. So there's some bits on if there's children with additional needs, there's some extra information about that. Loads of stuff, particularly stuff on teenagers some weeks or various things. So I just would send some of the additional material as well if parents wanted that. And it was just a way of me staying in touch with people on the course as we went through. So there's just a few extra little things there that might be helpful.
So the first question is, what are the pros and cons of letting folk access it on their own or arranging a course where we would meet together, talk, share, etc.? Babysitters in question mark. in brackets. Is the course all teaching, or does it invite lots of discussion as a key component? Some of that you've kind of answered already, but maybe just talk a bit about, you know, could for example me and my wife just access it ourselves and chat about it, or is it really important that it is kind of done in a slightly wider context than that?
I mean, I would say it's such a flexible resource. It can be used in all sorts of different ways. Yes, there is discussion time. There's usually 2 videos that provide the teaching, and there's a moment for individual reflection, either with your partner if you're with one, or just on your own. And then there's time at the end for group discussion, which I think parents find really valuable in hearing other people's experiences and realizing they're not alone. But equally, the videos are available on their website for free, so people can just watch it and do it in their own time. There's actually lots of different ways that the resources can be used, and on the Parenting for Faith website there's actually a whole page of ways you might use the course. Lots of churches have done it in lots of different ways, whether they've offered it to their small groups for content during the week, if there's groups with lots of parents in. Some churches have run it as a kind of 2 Saturday mornings where they've run kids groups alongside. Doing it over Zoom obviously as a group means that you don't have the kind of needs for babysitters and kind of childcare as you might if you're trying to get parents to come to church. Some churches have used it in their church services as a part of a series. So I think the joy of the material is that it's so flexible and it can be used in however way fits your community best. And if you ever come up with a new way of how to use it, we would love to know, because we'd love to tell people about it.
Brilliant. Okay, next question, really important question. If given opportunity to meet in person, would you run the course that way, or is Zoom a good forum due to childcare needs?
Interesting. So Zoom, we definitely benefited from having to do it on Zoom during the pandemic, but it did mean that both parents could be there the whole time, which they found really helpful. And I know that if we did it in person, for a lot of them, it would mean that not both of them could come. We did a little survey afterwards to see who would do it on Zoom again, and a lot of them would. So I would say that's definitely beneficial. Having said that, those without young children said that they would prefer to do it in person next time. So it's kind of a bit of both.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's nothing to stop you doing it 2 different ways, having some people in person and some on Zoom, if that worked. But I would definitely say those with younger children found it really helpful doing it on Zoom, but those with older children or no children at home did say that they would do it in person.
I've known churches that have run it by doing the first night and the last one as in person, and then so people get to meet each other, and then doing the 6 in the middle online. I've also known churches that have kind of been blessed with kids team that they can ask to go and be babysitters for the duration of the course and kind of equip families for that. But we know that that's not always an easy thing to organise. But yeah, it really is about what works for your community. Benefits to both ways, I think.
I really like the idea of having like an in-person meet up at the beginning and the end. And as a parent of 3 young children myself, I think potentially doing that like a Sunday afternoon or something where I don't have to sort out babysitters, but I get to meet everyone together, and then the evenings sessions happen on Zoom. So I guess there's kind of, it's a moving feast, isn't it? There's lots of different ways you could run it. But yeah, it's brilliant. I would personally want to run it in the winter in the evening, because I think people aren't out then, are they? So why not jump on the Zoom call? That's when you did it, wasn't it, Mim?
Yeah, we did it January to March.
Yeah. Next question, which I think Lauren was sort of going to speak to anyway with the extra resources section, which is how much of Parenting for Faith is for those with small children compared to teenagers?
Great question. Well, the course is aimed at anyone with children of any age, including teenagers. Lots of the examples used are from a variety of ages, but actually that's a very timely question, because Parenting for Faith are about to run a course centrally that they're going to be doing on Zoom. Rachel's going to be teaching it live, and it's aimed particularly at people with teenagers. So there'll be the same content, but with all of the examples about parenting teenagers for faith. And so churches are invited to either bring a group to that, And the way that it would work is that you would sign up as a church, and then in the discussion groups, you would be able to break out into the people that you've come from with your church. But it will be lots of different churches taking part in the same course that Rachel will teach live. So if you want any more information on that, you think that might be interesting to your parents, then you can get in touch with us, or the information should be on the website, or I'm happy to share my contact details if you would like to know more from there. But yeah, that the course is aimed at all ages, but with a specific twist to the course in September for teenagers.
Yeah, I was encouraged when I heard that, because I think there's some unique challenges to the teenage years in terms of how you parent faith, based on what's going on in the teenage brain and stuff. So hopefully that will get covered on the teenage version, of course. So next question is, what length of time would you recommend for the sessions? An hour, hour and a half, 2 hours?
On Zoom, we stuck to an hour and a quarter. I would say that is probably the minimum you want, but you also don't really want to go much longer on Zoom, because people get Zoom fatigue and don't want to be on Zoom for hours and hours. So that worked. I'd say you could probably push it to an hour and a half on Zoom. And I think particularly because people were finding the group discussion so beneficial, and we were sort of having to cut that off fairly short, I think you could probably do an hour and a half and people be okay with that. Lauren, I don't know how long you've done it in person.
I mean, slightly longer. An hour and a half to an hour and 45 is often quite helpful for in person, especially if you want to include like sort of drinks and on a and chatting, and you want kind of a bit more time for them to have reflection. It tends to go to about an hour and a half, an hour and 45.
Brilliant. Okay, next question. Mim, this is kind of directed at you. How was the commitment with it being on alternate weeks?
It actually worked really well. Again, partly because we were in lockdown, people weren't doing anything else. But doing it alternate weeks worked really well. And we had pretty much the same numbers the whole way through. Hardly anyone dropped out, or if it was just through illness or anything, it wasn't just sort of a lot of dropout. So yeah, alternate weeks worked well for us.
Brilliant. Could the course be offered to parents of a school who may not yet have a Christian commitment of their own? Is it a way adults can begin to explore their own faith?
Great question. I mean, obviously the course is all about passing on your faith to children. And so for parents who don't yet have their own faith, I think it would be a really interesting topic to explore. I think there would be some parts that maybe wouldn't quite make sense. But I think it's for if there's a particular group of parents that you know and you're working with, then definitely take a look at it. You can watch the videos online and you can kind of make that gauge for yourself. Maybe it's gifting a book to those parents as a starter rather than trying to get them to come to the whole course.
Brilliant. So I'm really conscious of time, so I wonder if, Lauren, you can quickly whip through some of the other resources that Parenting for Faith have available.
Well, why don't I start with some of the books that Rachel's written. So the course started with a book called Parenting Children for a Life of Faith. And she expanded it. This is an omnibus edition of 3 books in one, which is Parenting Children for a Life of Faith, A Life of Purpose, and A Life of Confidence. And kind of this is a really good kind of foundation of all this stuff. Some of the lots of the tools are covered in these books. But particularly for you guys as kind of the church leaders, I'd love to recommend a couple. This is the Green Book, we call it, but it's called It Takes a Church to Raise a Parent. And it's all about how to create a culture in your church community where parenting for faith can flourish. And I love this book. Every time I read it, I'm reminded of another thing or another tool that I can use in my church community. And then just a third one, she's also written a book called Parenting as a Church Leader. So if you have leaders in your church or you are a parent yourself, this is a great book for kind of helping work out what that unique role looks like, being a parent and a church leader. And they also run we also run some training days on some of these books so that you can go and kind of meet with other church leaders who are parenting at the same time. The Parenting for Faith website, parentingforfaith.org, is a treasure trove of information. It's kind of like YouTube for Parenting for Faith. You can type in any sort of question that you might have, and up will pop a variety of articles and videos that might help you answer that or help parents process. You could type in afraid of the dark, and up will come some testimonies for other parents or teaching or articles about how to help kids who are afraid of the dark. And it's always being updated. Parenting Faith are incredible at keeping up to date with what's going on in the world and helping parents navigate that with their kids. They just put an article out this week about after the Euros final on Sunday and helping kids dealing with loss and disappointment. And so, yeah, and if there's ever a topic that you're trying to engage or you have a parent ask you a question, you can just reach out to Parenting Faith and they will write something or put something out to help answer that question, because if one parent is asking, probably others are too. And then you can follow Parenting for Faith on social media. We have an Instagram account and a lively Facebook, couple of Facebook groups, one that is aimed at parents and hosts things like bedtime drinks with Rachel once a month, where she does a Facebook Live engaging with different topics for parents of different ages. This month, the topic was helping your family love church again. And then there's also a Facebook group for children's, youth and family leaders, which again hosts so it's a connection point for church leaders to talk to each other, but also we host lunch with Rachel once a month. And this week the topic, again, a Facebook Live, the topic was keeping the best bits of online connection. And so, yeah, really relevant, really up to date, lots of stuff going on. So I'd really encourage you to reach out to those things. And then finally, there's also a podcast. And so that's something that is really helpful to recommend to parents, sort of 20 minutes that goes out once a week, talking about different topics and things that parents might be asking or thinking about, and kind of a really easy, for parents who maybe haven't got the time to sit and read a book, they can kind of put the podcast on while they're doing other things and kind of just get a bit of wisdom and equipping through that.
A big thank you to Lauren and Mim for coming along and sharing a bit of their experience. And if there's anything more you need in terms of information, please don't hesitate to get in contact with me. Or if you're from Rochester, then you can contact Laura's on the call, so you can contact her by email, or Cheryl if you're in Rochester as well. So don't hesitate to email us if you want further kind of help and practical support in setting up a Parenting for Faith course. But thanks for coming. Thanks again to Lauren and Mim. Yeah, see you around. Hope you have a good rest of your evening.